Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
30 days since January 11th. And what have we done in 30 days? We have had a movement build, and a movement grow, and a movement blossom and explode, right? We have change in the courts. We have change in the streets.
A federal judge stays the deportation of immigrant rights leader Ravi Ragbir after Ragbir filed a free speech lawsuit charging the Trump administration with targeting immigrant rights activists with surveillance and deportation. We'll speak to Ravi Ragbir and look at how federal judges across the country are resisting Trump's deportation orders. Then we remember Asma Jahangir, Pakistan's leading human rights attorney. She died this weekend at the age of 66.
When you start off, there's something inside you telling you to do it. And it comes because you have a heart and an eye. And the courage to stand up against those forces, and there are plenty of them, believe me, that do not wish to see people free.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Tensions across northern Syria have escalated sharply amidst a series of clashes between external powers, including Israel, Iran, Turkey, and the Syrian government. On Saturday, Israel shot down what it claims was an Iranian drone that had entered Israel's airspace after being launched from Syria. Israel then mounted an attack on an Iranian command center in Syria from where the drone was launched. One of the Israeli F-16 military jets was then downed by a Syrian government anti-aircraft missile. Israel then carried out a series of retaliatory strikes against both Syrian and Iranian targets in Syria. Saturday's events mark the first Israeli jet shot down since the 1980s. It's also believed to be the first time Israel's carried out an attack in Syria on a site where Iranian troops were present. Meanwhile, also in northern Syria Saturday, a Turkish army helicopter was shot down by U.S.-backed Syrian Kurdish YPG fighters near the Syrian Kurdish city of Afrin, where Turkey has launched a bombing and ground offensive. All this comes as the United Nations is warning of soaring levels of civilian casualties in Syria. This is UN High Commissioner for Human Rights spokesperson Elizabeth Russell.
This has been a week of soaring violence and bloodshed in Syria. More than 1,000 civilian casualties in 6 days. We've received reports that at least 277 civilians have been killed. 230 of these people were killed in airstrikes by the Syrian government and their allies. In addition, 812 people were injured.
President Trump continues to defend members of his administration who are resigning amidst serious accusations of domestic violence and abuse. On Friday, White House speechwriter David Sorensen resigned after his ex-wife, Jessica Corbett, told The Washington Post he physically abused her during their short marriage, including by putting out a lit cigarette on her hand and running over her foot with a car. Sorensen's resignation comes after senior aide Rob Porter resigned as staff secretary last week after 2 of his ex-wives accused him of verbal and physical assault. On Saturday morning, President Trump tweeted, quote, "People's lives are being shattered and destroyed by a mere allegation. Some are true and some are false, some are old and some are new. There's no recovery for someone falsely accused. Life and career are gone. Is there no such thing any longer as due process?" he tweeted. President Trump also said he wishes Rob Porter well, speaking from the Oval Office Friday.
He said very strongly yesterday that he's innocent. So you'll have to talk to him about that. But we absolutely wish him well. Did a very good job while he was at the White House. Thank you very much, everybody.
On Sunday, Porter's second ex-wife, Jenny Willoughby, published a powerful Time magazine essay in which she addressed Trump's comments, writing, quote, "When Donald Trump repeated twice that Rob declared his innocence, I was floored. My friend turned to me and said, 'The President of the United States just called you a liar.' Yes, and so he did," she tweeted. President Trump himself has been accused of sexual assault or harassment by at least 16 women. Senior White House officials, including Chief Chief of Staff General John Kelly knew for months the FBI had heard testimony from Porter's ex-wives about the verbal and physical abuse. But on Sunday, Porter told the news outlet Axios that White House officials had encouraged him to stay and fight the accusations rather than resign. The Justice Department's third highest-ranking official, Rachel Brand, announced abruptly on Friday she plans to step down. Her resignation comes as President Trump has repeatedly attacked the Justice Department over the ongoing investigation into Trump and whether his presidential campaign colluded with Russia. Rachel Brand is next in line in succession after Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who's overseeing Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. Brand is leaving to take the top legal position at Walmart. Before she left the Justice Department, she revoked hundreds of so-called guidance documents on issues including healthcare, the environment, civil rights, and labor. The revocation of the Justice Department documents will make it significantly harder for companies to be sued on a wide range of issues. On Capitol Hill, the Senate set to begin a debate on immigration today. Lawmakers are expected to debate how to handle the future of DACA, the Obama-era program Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which gave some 800,000 young undocumented people permission to live and work in the United States before President Trump canceled the program last year. President Trump has proposed opening a path to citizenship for about 1.8 million undocumented people in exchange for a slew of dramatic anti-immigrant measures, including $25 billion in funding for a border wall, as well as ending the family reunification program and the diversity lottery, which primarily benefits immigrants from Africa. In more news on immigration, a federal judge has stayed the deportation of New York City immigrant rights leader Ravi Ragbir after he filed a free speech lawsuit arguing immigration officials unconstitutionally use their power to suppress political dissent by targeting outspoken activists for surveillance and deportation. Ragbir is the executive director of the New Sanctuary Coalition. He's now been ordered to check in with Immigration and Customs Enforcement on March 15th. He was going to be deported on Saturday. We'll speak with Ravi Ragbir after headlines. More than 100 public defenders walked out of a New York City courthouse Thursday to protest Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents arresting undocumented immigrants at the courthouse. The Legal Aid Society, which helped organize the strike at the Bronx courthouse, said, quote, "The presence of ICE officers in our courthouses and the perception that no immigrant is safe to seek their day in court is threatening to upend our entire legal process and the principles upon which it stands," unquote. A federal appeals court has ruled a group of immigrants detained at the for-profit Aurora ICE Processing Center can proceed with their class action lawsuit against the prison's owner, Geo Group. The men accused Geo Group of forcing detained immigrants to clean the prison without pay under threat of solitary confinement. The men are also accusing Geo Group of breaking labor laws by paying detained immigrants only $1 a day. Back in Washington, D.C., President Trump has blocked the release of a Democratic memo that refutes the arguments of the controversial now-released memo written by House Intelligence Committee Chair Devin Nunes. The Nunes memo purported to show the FBI and Justice Department abused their authority by placing Trump campaign advisor Carter Page under surveillance in 2016 over his ties to Russia. The counter-memo, written by the House Intelligence Committee's highest-ranking Democratic member, Adam Schiff, refutes those claims and was declassified by the committee last week. But over the weekend, Trump blocked the release of that memo, even though he allowed the Nunes memo to be released. New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman has sued Harvey Weinstein and the Weinstein Company over years of sexual harassment. The lawsuit has threatened the company's potential sale, which comes after more than 100 women accused Weinstein of rape, sexual assault, and harassment in cases that stretch back decades. Among the allegations in the New York lawsuit is that Weinstein sexually abused female workers and verbally threatened to kill employees and their entire families. In Britain, the charity Oxfam is facing a crisis after an investigation by the Times of London revealed Oxfam tried to cover up sex crimes by senior aid workers in Haiti after the devastating 2010 earthquake. The reports accuse Oxfam's senior aid workers, including the country director, of turning Oxfam's rented house into a makeshift brothel, including with sex workers who may have been under 18 years old. Senior members of Oxfam are meeting with British government officials today, and amidst the warnings the charity could lose its government funding. This is Haiti's ambassador to the UK, Bochid Edmond.
It is clear it's a cover-up case. The fact that those folks were allowed to leave the country without any punishment, without even informing relevant Haitian authorities about that, it was a cover-up. And now, the fact that they did such a crime, or there was such a cover-up, now we are wondering how many of those cases are still happening in Haiti. We don't know.
In news from the Korean Peninsula, North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, has invited South Korean President Moon Jae-in to visit the North Korean capital, Pyongyang, in what could be the first meeting of Korean leaders in more than a decade. The offer is the latest in a thaw of tensions on the peninsula amidst the Winter Olympics in South Korea. While returning from the Olympic opening ceremonies, Vice President Mike Pence says the United States would be open to talks with North Korea, although he recently announced a new round of sanctions against North Korea. The Reuters news agency has published a shocking report about how Burmese soldiers and members of an informal militia killed 10 Rohingya Muslim captives in September. At least 2 of the men were hacked to death. The others were shot. Reuters published one photo showing the 10 men lined up in a row on the day of their execution. A second photo shows the men's bloodied bodies buried in a single grave. The killings were part of what the United Nations has described as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. During the reporting of the article, 2 Reuters journalists were arrested by Burmese police. They've been detained since December 12th. Fellow journalist Saleh Tantzin of the publication The Irrawaddy criticized the detention of the journalist during a protest on Sunday.
The situation is now more obvious that Walon and Kyaso O were arrested because of their investigative report on the Indin massacre. Journalists have the right to access the news according to journalistic ethics. This incident is an abuse of justice. This is also evidence that the media are being intimidated in Burma.
The International Criminal Court has opened a preliminary inquiry into the reports of thousands of extrajudicial killings by police and security forces in the Philippines as part of President Rodrigo Duterte's so-called war on drugs. Duterte's repeatedly endorsed the use of extrajudicial killings. In Honduras, thousands protested outside the United Nations building in the capital Tegucigalpa Friday, demanding the United Nations recognize opposition candidate Salvador Nasralla as president. His rival, the U.S.-backed right-wing incumbent Juan Hernández, has been inaugurated as Honduras's president after November's presidential election, which was marred by widespread reports of voter fraud. A new report by the group COFEDE says at least 30 protesters have been killed and more than 1,000 arrested by police and military forces since the contested election. Among those imprisoned is longtime activist Edwin Espinal. This is Espinal speaking on Democracy Now! Back in 2013 when he was protesting against President Juan Orlando Hernández's first election.
This electoral process is very important to me and my family because with the social movements and the community organizers, we've been targeted by the militaries and police and the government, but just by the fact that they're organizing people in our communities to improve our communities and educate people in our communities about the political situation in our country.
In Iran, hundreds of thousands of people gathered Sunday to mark the 39th anniversary of the 1979 Islamic Revolution. During the demonstrations, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani reaffirmed Iran's commitment to the 2015 nuclear deal and criticized the United States for threatening to undo the landmark accord.
ما شاهد شکست We witnessed the failure of America in the past year. The Americans wanted to interfere in our state matters, but our people said no to them through their unity, through their togetherness, through their steadfastness. They nullified the Americans' plans and conspiracies.
In more news on Iran, the family of a prominent Iranian-Canadian environmentalist and professor is demanding an independent autopsy after he was found dead in a prison in Tehran. Kavus Sayed Imami was one of the founders of the Persian Wildlife Heritage Foundation. He'd been arrested along with other environmental activists in late January. Iranian authorities say he committed suicide. In the latest news about WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, The Guardian's reporting Sweden attempted to drop extradition proceedings against Assange 5 years ago, but was pressured to reverse course by British prosecutors. Sweden eventually dropped its investigation into allegations of sexual misconduct by Assange last year. The news comes just after a British judge upheld the British arrest warrant for Assange, who has been living in the Ecuadorian embassy in London since 2012 after gaining political asylum there. Another judicial decision is expected Tuesday, when a British court is scheduled to respond to a motion by Assange's lawyers who are attempting to force Britain to drop its arrest warrant for him. A Russian commercial plane crashed near the capital Moscow Sunday afternoon, killing all 71 people on board. Among the victims of the crash were 3 children. The cause of the crash is unknown. In Puerto Rico, wide swaths of the island were plunged back into darkness Sunday after an explosion and fire at an electrical station. The Puerto Rico Electrical Power Authority, known as PREPA, says several municipalities lost power, including parts of the capital, San Juan. This comes after Puerto Rico's electrical power grid was devastated by Hurricane Maria. Parts of the island have still not regained power since the hurricane 4 months ago. And world-renowned Pakistani human rights lawyer and activist Asma Jahangir has died at the age of 66. For decades, she's been a leading advocate for women, minorities, and democracy in Pakistan and outside. In 1983, she was imprisoned for her work with the movement to restore democracy during the military rule of General Zia-ul-Haq. Later in 2007, she was put under house arrest for helping lead a lawyers' protest movement that helped oust military leader Pervez Musharraf. As one of Pakistan's most powerful lawyers, she founded the country's first legal aid center in 1986, went on to serve as the first female president of the Supreme Court Bar Association of Pakistan. This is Asma Jahangir, speaking in a video produced by the Right Livelihood Award, which she won in 2014.
Justice is a rare commodity in our part of the world. Very rare. But sometimes even shouting for justice gives you some satisfaction that you're being heard. And you must be heard. You knock, and you knock, and you knock, and you knock, and you knock. And one day they are going to hear.
Asma Jahangir died on Sunday in Lahore, Pakistan, at the age of 66 after suffering cardiac arrest. We'll have more on her life story later in the broadcast. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. In a dramatic move on Friday, a federal judge stayed the deportation of immigrant rights leader Ravi Ragbir, which had been scheduled for the next day, on Saturday. Ragbir is executive director of the New Sanctuary Coalition and won this day after filing a free speech lawsuit that argues immigration officials unconstitutionally use their power to suppress political dissent by targeting outspoken activists for surveillance and deportation. He filed the suit together with Detention Watch Network, the National Immigration Project of the National Lawyers Guild, the New York Immigration Coalition, and Casa de Maryland.
Ravi Ragbir has now been ordered to check in with Immigration and Customs Enforcement again on March 15th. That's his new deportation date. Well, on Saturday, hundreds celebrated his stay to fight another day at a You Can't Deport a Movement rally here in Manhattan, where speakers included the New York City public advocate Letitia James, New Sanctuary Coalition member Judith Paez, and New York Congress member Nydia Velázquez. First, we go to Ravi Ragbir's attorney, Elena Das.
We will take these fights to the courts. ICE keeps saying they're just enforcing the law, these unjust laws. Well, the laws include the Constitution. The laws include due process. They include the First Amendment. You know, to the people who are standing out here, so many of you standing for Ravi, even the people standing in the back, the small crowd that are standing for hate, you're able to do that because of the First Amendment. And none of us deserve to be taken from our homes and our families because we are speaking our own truth.
You can't kill an idea. You can't kill a thought. You can't kill a belief. And you cannot deport a movement.
We are here to claim to put an end to the continued injustice of treating us like criminals, to put an end to the injustice that still separates thousands of families, to put an end to the continuing enriching of a handful of heartless people towards the suffering of millions.
We have to do everything within our power. And that is the reason why I have introduced legislation that will grant Robbie legal permanent status. Or, if he should be deported, a legal right to return. I'm not going to fool anyone. The majority, the Republicans control the House and the Senate. But it is important that when we go before any court, any federal court, that we send a message to the judge that when we have a movement like this, it speaks volumes about the kind of human being that Robbie is.
That was New York Representative Nydia Velázquez and other voices from Saturday's You Can't Deport a Movement rally in New York City. On Friday, Ravi Ragbir's attorney also argued another case on his behalf, this one in the Federal District Court of New Jersey, which challenges the legality of his sole conviction and sentence for wire fraud. Judge Kevin McNulty said he would issue a written opinion on whether he, too, could issue a stay for Ragbir, noting, quote, the damage he'd suffer and the injury he'd suffer as a result of deportation is obvious to me.
Well, for more, we're joined by Ravi Ragbir, Executive Director of the New Sanctuary Coalition. Ravi, welcome back to Democracy Now! I didn't know if you would be in this studio again. Your deportation date was set for Saturday. We were in the Newark courthouse on Friday when, as we were coming in by train, we got the news in another case, not related to the Newark case, that a federal... Was it a federal judge?
It was a federal judge.
A federal judge ruled on a free speech issue in your case and stayed your deportation, which was set for this past Saturday.
Yes, correct. What is even more important to note, the judge didn't issue this on his own. This was an agreement between the government agents, ICE itself, and my attorneys, and they both agreed to stay this deportation, and the judge, all the judge did was ratify what was agreed to by Immigration and Customs Enforcement with my attorneys.
And explain what that case was about.
Well, that was about free speech. You know, what we are seeing is a targeting of leadership, or a targeting of immigrant voices who are speaking out against this travesty, this terrorization of our communities, immigrant communities, our destruction of our families and the people around us. And they're taking this with an intent and with a plan to cause further terror, psychological warfare, they call it, against those people. Because if they take me away, and those, I have a lot of support. What it sends is a message: we are going to, no matter who you are, who's supporting you, you will be deported. And people are feeling this everywhere whenever you talk to them.
And were you surprised by that decision? Because, one, that would seem to indicate if the judge and ICE agreed, it's probably because the judge told ICE, I'm going to rule against you. So you may as well come along and do an agreement so you don't have a precedent already set in the court. But it also seems that it's a much more expansive issue than just your particular case, clearly, that is dealing with the whole issue, as you say, of immigrant rights activists being repressed, in effect, by the ICE.
So I want to answer your question with a question. Name any country that doesn't have that does not have a strong judicial protection. Even dictatorship has to suppress the judiciary. Name any agency in the United States, criminal justice, the Department of Justice, U.S. Marshal, even the FISA courts, and that's in secret, has to have judiciary approval. Yet, Immigration and Customs Enforcement is saying to the courts, right, this is the third branch of government saying to the courts, you do not have jurisdiction over me. That is what we are at stake here right now. And it's creating, Congresswoman Clark said, it's creating a Gestapo. Who pushed back at what she said, it was the right wing. the Nazis themselves were saying you cannot use those words, but you will have the ACLU speaking about this, where how could an agency not have the court doesn't have jurisdiction over an agency.
Explain what you found as you were about to be deported, when you were about to turn yourself in. This was January 11th, and we're carefully following your case as an example of what happens to others, though it is certainly not typical. At the same time, they were targeting another member of the New Sanctuary movement, Jean Montreville, who did get deported to Haiti. They picked him up before his check-in on the street. ICE agents converged on him next to his home. Now, at the same time, and there was a very good piece in The Intercept, ICE is targeting political opponents for deportation, about the surveillance of you before you went for your ICE check-in outside the Judson Church, where your organization is based and where people take sanctuary, and outside your home.
So when Jean was picked up, immediately we mobilized to find out what's causing this. Why this sudden shift? Because he had to report to immigration in less than 2 weeks, and it was a clear signal to us, that to me and to my attorneys, that you will come in here, you are not going to be released. But even prior to that, our members who have been trained to be vigilant around their surroundings were saying they've seen cars that look strangely bizarre. People are sitting in the car, not moving. The engine is on, and they're just sitting there for hours.
Black tinted windows.
Black tinted windows.
Government-looking cars.
Exactly. And with the antennas, those antennas. So hopefully they will change those antennas. But anyhow, we want them to have it. And then on that Wednesday when Jean was picked up, people kept seeing these cars, and it wasn't that they were away from the church. They were literally in front of the door. So as you come out, you're seeing this tinted window, government-looking car, and you're wondering what is happening. Fortunately for us, our people are trained so that we didn't just sit back and hide. Everyone went up and knocked at the windows. Who are you and why are you here? We call NYPD to get involved, because this was we have so many immigrants coming to the space. We don't know where the threat was coming from. And they had to get involved. They didn't get involved, unfortunately, because we assume that ICE had already told them that they were around. But when people, not me, because I couldn't go outside. If I had gone outside, I would have been taken away. When my ministers and the support and my attorneys, they knocked on the window. As they looked down, they saw the ICE plate, DHS. Inside a vehicle. And they denied it, but it was obvious. We knew that they were surveilling us. But and not only at the church where we are housed, but we sent a team to my home, and they were surrounded my home waiting for me.
Well, we're going to break, and then we're going to come back to this. But I do want to quote last month the U.S. District Judge Catherine Forrest, who ordered your immediate release from detention after you were held for, what, almost 3 weeks, 18 days, calling your detention, well, she said in a decision she read aloud from the bench, quote, that you had the freedom to say goodbye, and compared your treatment to that of regimes we revile as unjust, regimes where those who have long lived in a country may be taken without notice from streets, home, and work and sent away. We are not that country, and woe be the day that we become that country under a fiction that laws allow it. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, we'll expand this discussion. We'll be joined by Lee Gallant of the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, and others to talk about what federal judges are doing around the country right now and what activists are continuing to do on the ground. Stay with us. Tick-tock, tick. Come Together by Laura Love. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, a federal judge has stayed the deportation of immigrant rights leader Ravi Ragbir after he filed a free speech lawsuit charging the Trump administration of targeting immigrant rights activists with surveillance and deportation. I want to list some of the other outspoken immigrants who have been targeted by ICE, as laid out by Nick Pinto in The Intercept. Daniela Vargas, a 22-year-old activist who came to the United States from Argentina when she was 7, was detained by ICE agents last March as she was leaving a news conference in Jackson, Mississippi, where she had spoken on the Obama-era Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program that stayed her own deportation for lacking immigrant status. The same month, in Vermont, ICE arrested Jose Enrique Balcazar Sanchez and Zuli Victoria Palacios Rodriguez, 2 leading organizers with Migrant Justice, a workers' rights organization. Palacios Rodriguez's lawyer, Matt Cameron, told the Boston Globe that the offense she was arrested for, overstaying her visa by some 8 months, wouldn't usually attract ICE's attention, and that it's especially unusual for such a person to be held without bail as his client was. A couple of months later, 2 more migrant justice activists, Yesenia Hernández Ramos and Esau Peche Ventura, were arrested by a Border Patrol agent and transferred to ICE custody after taking part in a march outside of Ben & Jerry's plant to demand better working conditions for farm workers supplying milk to the ice cream giant. In December, ICE began deportation proceedings against Maru Mora Villalpando, a 47-year-old activist who came from Mexico more than 25 years ago and is an outspoken critic of ICE's deportation and detention practices in the Seattle area. Also in December, Baltasar Aburto Gutierrez, a 35-year-old clam harvester in Washington State, was detained after he was quoted in local papers talking about his girlfriend's recent deportation. "You're the one from the newspaper," Aburto Gutierrez says the ICE agent who detained him said. "My supervisor asked me to come find you because of what appeared in the newspaper." In January, ICE agents in Colorado arrested Eliseo Jurado after his wife, Ingrid Encalada La Torre, publicly took sanctuary in a Boulder church to avoid deportation to Peru. That is all from Nick Pinto's article in The Intercept, titled "ICE is Targeting Political Opponents for Deportation," Ravi Ragbir and rights groups say in court. Ravi, this amazing list of activists being rounded up, essentially, by ICE around the country. Your reaction?
Well, what we are seeing here is a state of fear that they're trying to create by taking people away. Maru has always been I know Maru, we have been in many conferences together, and she has always been outspoken. And to send her notice to appear now so that she is in removal proceeding is a direction, shows the direction the agency is heading to. Look at the resources they allocated to deport me. You're seeing that this is an intensification against the immigrant community. You had a quote from the president, "Where is the due process?" Well, we should be asking, where is the due process in what we are seeing?
He was talking, President Trump was talking about for domestic violence abusers in his White House.
Correct. Which and you have photographic proof of the abuse, but we have seen his support for those abusers, right? But we are not seeing his support for the families who are being destroyed.
Well, Lee Gerland of the ACLU, what about that issue of due process? What due process rights do people who are in the country, according to ICE, illegally have?
Yeah, they absolutely have due process rights. And the reason is because the Constitution uses the word persons rather than citizens. And the Supreme Court has long ago held that immigrants have due process rights. And what we're seeing around the country is the Trump administration rounding up people, large groups of people, and then trying to deport them abruptly without giving them their due process rights. And what's even more troubling, perhaps, is that when we go to court, they're saying the courts don't have jurisdiction, authority to enforce the due process rights of immigrants. So the ACLU has been fighting cases in Detroit on behalf of Iraqis, Boston and New Jersey on behalf of Indonesian Christians.
And what's happened in these cases?
In these cases, the judges have all blocked the deportation, which is heartening. And I've been doing this a long time, but I don't think I can remember a time when the judges have been so pointed in questioning the government and saying some of these individuals, many of these individuals are likely to be tortured or killed if sent back. Why are you rushing them out of the country without even giving them time to file claims? The judges have been extremely critical of the government, but issuing rigorous legal opinions. The government's appealed, and we'll see what happens. But for now, it's been heartening.
But in a lot of those cases, it's been ethnic groups that were, in essence, targeted by by ICE. What about this issue of political activists, in essence, which is obviously not a lot more difficult, possibly, to first to amass the evidence and then to get rulings on?
Right. So I think those cases are a subset of this larger problem. We at the ACLU are hearing about these cases, as Robbie pointed out, as you've pointed out, all over the country where people who are speaking out are being targeted, and we're concerned that it's suppressing political speech. And that's very troubling. And what we anticipate the government saying is, well, the courts don't have jurisdiction to do anything about it. So I think we're in for a long battle before the courts.
I want to read what the ICE Deputy Director, Thomas Homan, told the New York Times about the recent decisions by federal judges in cases of immigrants who are fighting their deportation. He said, "I'm increasingly troubled by orders from federal judges halting the deportation of certain groups of individuals, all of which appear to ignore the fact that each alien in question was lawfully ordered removed from the United States after full and fair proceedings, many of which lasted several years or longer at great taxpayer expense. Further, these orders hinder ICE's efforts to address the clear public safety threat posed by many of these aliens, the majority of whom have criminal convictions. Of course, entering the United States illegally is itself a crime," said ICE's Deputy Director Thomas Homan. Legal Errand.
Yeah, that's not responsive to what the federal judges are saying. The federal judges are recognizing that these individuals have final orders, but what they're also pointing out is these final orders were decades ago. These individuals have lived peaceful lives for decades, but more importantly, if they're sent back, they may be tortured. And so the part of the law that he's ignoring is that Congress has set up a system to say you can go and reopen your case if you believe you're going to be tortured or persecuted if sent back. That's the part of the law that Congress enacted that he's ignoring.
So, last week, a federal judge in Newark, New Jersey, temporarily blocked the removal of dozens of Indonesian Christians, including 2 fathers who were detained by ICE as they were taking their children to school. We're joined by Seth Copperdale, pastor of the Reformed Church of Highland Park in New Jersey. He was the Green Party candidate for governor of New Jersey in 2017. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you so much, Juan and Amy.
Could you tell us the latest developments with the folks that were taking refuge in your church?
Yes, so with those taking refuge in our church, I can say that after the ACLU lawsuit was filed a week ago Friday, and the judge heard it immediately, we felt a great deal of relief. The lawsuit itself doesn't say that ICE can't take action against people here, but it says that ICE can't remove people from the country or move them out of district. So we believe that the people who are living in our sanctuary can go home, and they have gone home, and they have been safe since that time. We think it would be very foolish if ICE were to act against them when a judge has clearly made it clear that this is an exploratory moment. So one of the things that concerns us is that the two people who were detained 2 weeks ago, Thursday, the same day that one of my church members made it here into sanctuary, they are still detained. We were hoping that maybe they would be released during the time that things are pending. We have, 4 U.S. citizen children who are desperate to see their dads, and so we're hopeful that ICE would release them during the time that this was holding. But as of now, they're still detained.
The governor got involved, is that right? The Democratic governor, after he was sworn in, came to your church. I want to turn to one of the wives of the Indonesian men targeted by ICE, speaking with the New Jersey governor, Phil Murphy, during his visit to your church, the Highland Park Reformed Church. She's not seen on camera to protect her identity.
I came in here in 1998 when China in Indonesia was raping, was killing, was torture, and then I was escaped and came in this country. Since I came into New Jersey. I working, I pay tax, I pay my own insurance, and then right now I'm working for pay the insurance for my husband and my kids. I never even claim any penny from the government to give me stand up. Right now I'm talking be helped on myself and my friend, we are here, we're working hard. I didn't ask him for anything, just leave us alone, and then let us raise our children until whatever dream they want. We don't want to kill their dream because I cannot bring them to my country. It's 100%. Not belong to them.
So that was the wife of one of the Indonesian men that was taken. Pastor Seth Copperdale, the significance of the intervention of the stay of deportation now, do you see this as part of a trend of federal judges saying no to the Trump administration? And what needs to happen now? Also, there are a group of Indonesians, and I believe Lee Gallant can address this, in Boston. And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, I do see it as a trend. And I would say that in the case of the Indonesians, my congregation was deeply involved in working with ICE many years ago in creating opportunities for Indonesians who are not a deportation priority to get stays because ICE recognized the horrible torture and possible danger that awaited folks in Indonesia. So we've worked in the past with ICE to do the things that now we're counting on judges to do. And I think that that's one of the things that's happening. We had a moment where the administration understood prosecutorial discretion, especially around issues around torture and other things. And now we're in a place where we're counting on judges to do what at one point we could count on the administrative wing to do.
Lee Gallant, what about this issue of the Indonesian Christians, especially since President Trump has on several occasions talked about the persecution of Christians around the world, and yet right here in the United States they're not dealing with the legitimate requests of the Indonesian Christians not to be sent back to a place where they could be persecuted.
Yeah, exactly. And so we went to court in Boston on behalf of approximately 50 Indonesian Christians, and the judge blocked deportation. And the judge said, look, I am not deciding the legality of their deportation ultimately, but what I am going to do is give them time to go before an immigration court to show that as Indonesian Christians, they will be persecuted or tortured if sent back. And that's just basic due process. Now the Indonesian Christians in New Jersey are being threatened in the same way, so we went to court and blocked that. But it's Christian Iraqis out of Detroit in the whole country.
How many Iraqis in Detroit are you representing?
There are 1,900 approximately around the country, not just Detroit. We expanded it to the whole country. The judge has blocked nationwide. And all we're asking for is basic due process. Let them go to immigration court to show they're going to be tortured or killed. When the judge said to the administration, why not give them time? It's clear that they may be in danger. The administration said, no, we're not giving them any time. That's when the judge stepped in the best traditions of our federal court.
And Ravi Ragbir, Holman, the deputy director of ICE, attacking the judiciary.
Well, it's not only Holman. If you hear the AG, Attorney General Sessions, he himself have said publicly that this country would be so much better if we didn't have a judiciary where it is right now. That shows the direction of where we're heading to. And I also wanted to point out two things. One is my cases, the New Jersey case is different, and the First Amendment case is different. They're saying that they don't have. ICE is saying that that court doesn't have jurisdiction for a case that is dealing with a criminal conviction and the First Amendment. It has nothing to do with the actual deportation order itself. And that is what is at stake here, where they are taking away the tools of the court to protect its own space, its own process. And they're fighting that. And you see that the violence that is coming as a result.
This critical point, and McNulty, the federal judge in Newark, made this point repeatedly on Friday, this issue of what it means when you have someone before them and then another branch of government deports them.
Well, absolutely. And so I just want to be clear. That is happening in Ravi's case, but it is happening in all the cases I've described. In every case, the government's principal argument is the court lacks jurisdiction to do anything. And so that's the common theme around the country. The courts don't have authority to do anything. And that's what the courts have rejected so far, and hopefully will continue to reject.
Well, I want to thank you both for being with us. Ravi Ragbir, who now has a deportation date for March 15th, but a federal judge in New Jersey is going to decide whether to extend a stay before that date. Pastor Seth Copperdale, speaking to us from New Jersey, whose church has given sanctuary to an Indonesian immigrant and legal alert of the ACLU Immigrants' Rights Project. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, we remember a great human rights lawyer, humanitarian, and activist from Pakistan. Stay with us. A Model of the Universe by award-winning composer Jóhann Jóhannsson. The Icelandic musician and producer has died at the age of 48. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, we end today's show by looking at the extraordinary life of world-renowned Pakistani human rights lawyer and activist Asma Jahangir, who died on Sunday in Lahore at the age of 66. For decades, Jahangir has been a leading advocate for women, minorities, and democracy in Pakistan. In 1983, she was imprisoned for her work with the movement to restore democracy during the military rule of General Zia-ul-Haq. Later in 2007, she was put under house arrest for helping lead a lawyers' protest movement that helped oust military leader Pervez Musharraf. Asma Jahangir was also the founding chairwoman of the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan. She served repeatedly as a UN rapporteur on human rights, extrajudicial killings, and religious freedom. At the time of her death, she was the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Iran.
On Sunday, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in a statement, "We have lost a human rights giant." As one of Pakistan's most powerful lawyers, Asma Jahangir founded Pakistan's first legal aid center in 1986, went on to serve as the first female president of the Supreme Court Bar Association of Pakistan. This is Asma Jahangir speaking in a video produced by the Right Livelihood Awards, which she won in 2014.
When you start off, there's something inside you telling you to do it. And it comes because you have a heart and an eye. and the courage to stand up against those forces, and there are plenty of them, believe me, that do not wish to see people free. Human rights, it's not a job, it's a conviction. I've used the law as an instrument and I've used the courts, but I've been on the streets as well. I've been in protest marches, I've been to prison, I've been in the house arrest. So for each issue and for each incident, there has to be a thought-out strategy. Justice is a rare commodity in our part of the world. Very rare. But sometimes even shouting for justice gives you some satisfaction that you're being heard. And you must be heard. You knock, and you knock, and you knock, and you knock, and you knock. And one day they are going to hear.
That was Asma Jahangir. She died on Sunday in Lahore, Pakistan, after suffering a heart attack. We're joined now by one of her dear friends, Aisha Jalal, the Mary Richardson Professor of History at Tufts University and the Fletcher School. She was not only a close personal friend of Asma Jahangir, she is also the author of a number of books, including The Struggle for Pakistan, a Muslim Homeland and Global Politics. Professor Jalal, our condolences to you on the death of Asma. First and foremost,
thank you very much.
Talk about Asma's significance in the world and what she represented and did.
I mean, she's an icon of human rights internationally, but within Pakistan, she was really the symbol of the restoration of democracy. It was her petition to release her father that led to basically the principle being enunciated by the judiciary that martial law was not above the Constitution.
Her father was a progressive politician in Pakistan?
That's right, that's right. And he was in jail and under martial law, and she filed a petition and she won. And that led to the process for the restoration of democracy in Pakistan. So I really see her as that. History will remember her for that. In the context of Pakistan, internationally, of course, she is an icon of international human rights.
She's also recognized as a pioneer of women's rights in Pakistan. Could you talk about her advocacy on the behalf of women within Pakistan?
I mean, she has been transformative in women's issues, bringing women's issues into the public. It's because of her that many women acquired the courage to go and seek justice. She set up a special home for women who suffered abuse called Dastak. So she did a great deal for women's rights in Pakistan, and I think she has really helped change the discourse on women's rights in Pakistan.
Can you talk about her jailing under Zia-ul-Haq, her house detention when she led lawyers protesting the dictatorship?
I mean, Asma was incorrigible, and she was not to be deterred by any military dictator. I think that there was a certain sort of personality that she sort of, that she became under military rule, and under democracy, she had a different sort of attitude. She wanted to improve democracy, but with the generals, she was ferocious. So I can tell you this, that she was never cowed down by either Zia-ul-Haq or Musharraf, and that's what made Asma so great.
And also her role in the international human rights movement, her many posts as a rapporteur for the United Nations. Could you talk about that as well?
I mean, she has been inspirational for the human rights movement internationally. I think her personality, her courage, outspokenness, she never really compromised on principles. And I think for all those reasons, the international community of human rights defenders will remember her, and we will continue to remember Asma. She will always live in our hearts and our minds.
We wanted to go to a few clips of Asma herself. This from 2012, when Asma Jahangir spoke at the Oslo Freedom Forum about the U.S.-backed dictatorship of General Zia-ul-Haq of Pakistan.
When I became a lawyer, that was the time that the most lethal dictator, Zia-ul-Haq, had taken over our country. He was patronized by the West because he was the leader of the so-called jihad industry, which now you are suffering also in the West. But we suffered it even before September 11th. For us, every single day was September 11th, ever since Zia-ul-Haq took office in Pakistan. For us, we had never seen public flogging before, and we saw it then. For us, we had never experienced laws which said that people should be stoned to death and their hands should be amputated. But we did see it with Zia-ul-Haq. And we had all the Western leadership backing this great jihadist to the cost of the people and the women of Pakistan.
And this is Asma Jahangir when she received the Right Livelihood Award in 2014.
Often I have been asked if I had any plans of leaving Pakistan because of numerous threats. Without any hesitation, I have replied negatively, because in comparison to the terror of some, the warmth I have received from others is overwhelming. Pakistan has numerous problems and several faults, but it is also unique in its preservation and perseverance to overcome intolerance, boldly face authoritarianism, and in denouncing terrorist acts carried out in the name of religion. Pakistanis have deeply suffered, and they deserve better.
I know this is so hard for you to hear her voice. This is such a shock. She had so many plans for the future, Professor Jalal. But your thoughts of the legacy she leaves?
I mean, the legacy is going to be with us. It'll be very hard for people to step into her shoes, but I think that there are many able individuals, men and women, thanks to her, because she has really given her best to the youth in the hope that they will continue something that she started, transformed, and that is the conception of basic rights, human rights, as we know in the West, but basic democratic rights for all, for women, for minorities, and Asma will be with us forever.
Let's end with Asma Jahangir speaking in 2012 at the University of San Diego.
And I recall many years ago, when first time I went to prison and I came out, my daughter, who was very young at that time, was very upset that I had gone to jail and said to me, "Why do you do this? Why do you continuously keep going to police stations and jails? I can assure you that if you didn't do it, women's rights would come. They will come without you. With you there, they may come only an hour earlier. So why do you have to leave us?" But I think we are all fighting for that hour earlier.
That hour earlier. Aisha Jalal, in these last 20 seconds, what you'll tell your students today at Tufts.
I think she's a model to be understood and followed and emulated by those who really want to pursue a career in human rights, but even for those who are committed to enhancing democratic dynamics in their countries. I think Asma is somebody that we can all take a leaf from.
Aisha Jalal, Mary Richardson Professor of History at Tufts University and the Fletcher School, close personal friend of Asma Jahangir, who died of a heart attack this weekend in Lahore, Pakistan, where she lived. That does it for our broadcast. Democracy Now! Produced by Mike Burke, Renee Feldstein, Guzder, Nermeen Sheikh, Carla Wells, Laura Gottesdiener. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.